Hello, hello. Welcome to Who's Views. And yes, it's companion piece. Hello to the WHOTASTIC panel. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh,
hello there. Hello,
listen.
everyone. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so
G'day.
much. Oh, we lost somebody there. What happened there?
That was a short one.
Brendan, come back.
Good night, everybody.
Brendan, come back. Yeah, welcome to Who's Views. This is companion piece, and in this series, the first of a new series, we're going to be celebrating our wonderful companions, and we're going to be starting with the one and only. Yeah, it is. It's Sarah Jane Smith, as played by the much missed and the much loved Elisabeth Sladen. Goodness me, here we go then. So just a quick potted history, and he's back. He's coming back through. So here he is. Hello there, how are you?
Hello. The time muddler got in the muddle then.
Happened.
Well,
Catch trip over.
yeah.
It's about time.
Good
I
to
was a
see
bit
you.
like Tom. I was like Tom Baker. I was getting stuck in some vortex then.
Not for the first time, Hugh viewers, I can assure you.
Oh.
Right, so listen, just the potted history coming up here as well about Sarah Jane Smith. First appeared, as we say, of course, played by the wonderful Elisabeth Sladen in Doctor Who, The Time Warrior, on the 15th of December, 1973. Of course, she went right up until 1976, but we can actually safely say that on the 15th of December, 1973, things were never quite the same again. Now, that's a phrase that is used an awful lot these days, but this is an instance, a true instance of that actually being 100% accurate. Things were never same again when Sarah Jane Smith came into the Doctor's life. So, panel. Was anyone there watching it live on the 15th of December, 1973? They all say, looking at Time Muddler and Sarah John Smith. What are your memories, guys?
Yeah, well, I was there. Yeah, I was there. In fact, I was celebrating a fairly significant birthday at that point. I think it was my 10th, actually. And we had a party. And the first episode of The Time Warrior, we settled down to watch that as what me and some friends as part of the festivities, and so we had Smarties, and jelly beans, and jelly babies before they were Doctor Who specific, and lots of things to enjoy. And the first slap bang what we got was obviously the brand new Pertwee title sequence, and we were all a bit trepidatious because we just lost Jo Grant. We just cried our eyes out a few months prior to that, and then this new young lady landed on us. And we'll talk about this later on, but at that point, little did I know then the impact that character, that actress, that time was going to have, not only on Doctor Who, but on my life, because she is, and forever, our Sarah Jane.
Oh, totally. That's a lovely introduction there, John. All right, what about you guys? I mean, I've got vague memories of this happening because I was only 3, but I've got vague memories of this, guys. You guys are a little bit older than me.
Well, I was 5.
Go on, don't rub it in.
I was 5, and Doctor Who was just starting to become a fixture for me here. I'd dabbled with the previous season. My first companion was Jo Grant, and I liked the Jo Grant, John Pertwee. Well, yeah, that's your first kind of formula that you see and you trusted. So obviously, once we came to the Time Warrior with a new sequence that made it all very exciting, as John said, I had a bit of trepidation. I think Doctor Who fans do have this. It's no good me doing a retrospective saying the first moment I saw Elisabeth Sladen, I thought this was it. No, it wasn't like that at all. I was missing Jo Grant, a bit like John Pertwee. And there was an element of, she had short hair. It was different. It was just, I was a little 5-year-old thinking, what's happened? And the Green Death had been so beautifully shot, really, and so sad with the loss of Jo Grant, that I remember when she appeared and she was more, not abrasive like Tegan, but she had questions. She was a journalist and she was a bit more kind of confident. And as a little kid, I was going, oh, what's all this about? But as John said, we didn't realise these were our formative years. This was going to be the halcyon years, the peak years of Doctor Who Classic. And that she was going to be the companion with the Doctor for our time.
Paul, would you agree with that?
Is Paul frozen?
He must have done. Okay, Paul, can you hear us? All right. Okay. So, Michael, where were you when Sarah Jane came into Doctor Who?
Well, I was living in the northern part of Australia, and we were blessed in Australia, as I've said probably a few times, with a lot of repeats. So
Oh yeah.
I came into Doctor Who around season 18 on its first broadcast. Then we went into 19 and so on. Then we went back to Pertwee, and I saw. So I had seen Tom turn into Peter, and I don't want to digress, but Tom turned into Peter, and then I saw Pertwee, this third guy, and then an episode called The Three Doctors came on. So there's two more. Hang on a minute, what? Where? Anyway, I was completely confused. But by the time the Time Warrior started, I was really into it, and as John mentioned, that title sequence, you could I'd established myself as a viewer of Katie Manning with John Pertwee, that lovely diamond title sequence, the red and greens and so on. And then this new title sequence started, and it was something I could tell there was a huge shift happening even at that age. And then when Sarah turned on, the dynamic was, when Sarah came on, pardon me if I'm not very articulate, it's 3 a.m. here. The dynamic had shifted, and it was very, very different. And I just remember being completely transfixed by her performance and thinking, wow, she's really shaking things up. And dare I say, a wonderful, strong female lead.
Well, you can absolutely dare saying that, because it's absolutely true. And one of the things when you're looking at the Time Warrior, any time from when it was originally broadcast right up to today, is the rapport between Liz and John is there. So it makes the character work. Here's the Doctor, the third Doctor, being, he's doing his unit stuff. He's on his own at this point, apart from the guys that are around him at unit. He's obviously moved on slightly from Joe Grant. There's no, today you would get all this baggage, wouldn't you? You'd get a moping Doctor and heartbroken Doctor and all this sort of stuff, but not with this Doctor. This Doctor's got it together. He's moved on. And then this pretty young girl comes into his life. And yeah, as I said at the top of the show, changes his life together all the way through. I've got a quote here, if I may as well, guys, from John Pertwee. Now, this is taken from an interview by Richard Marston in Doctor Who Monthly 113. Back in 1986. Liz Sladen was a very talented lady with tremendous looks and a smashing figure. I remember Barry saying to me, "Come along and meet Liz." And as they were casting for KT's replacement, I instantly knew that this was the girl Barry had in mind. Anyway, he led me into his office and introduced us. We all stayed for a coffee and some general conversation. And little did Liz know that every time her back was turned, I was making thumbs up signs to Barry, who, when given the opportunity, was frantically returning them to me. I think that's absolutely fantastic, because that was the makings of Sarah Jane Smith and the third Doctor. And it really, really does come through, doesn't it? We've got Jack here. Hello to everybody in the chat. Nice to see you all. Thanks for joining us. Jack Thursby is saying here that Sarah is the best companion to the Doctor ever.
Yes.
I think we're all agreed on that one, aren't we?
Absolutely. Untouchable. And interestingly, it's funny you should say that, JT, about Pertwee and Barry Letts giving the thumbs up behind, because as it was the fates working here with Liz Sladen, because initially, as we now know, that they'd originally cast another actress in that part, April Walker, and even before Elisabeth Sladen had got to that hurdle. There was an opportunity for her, perhaps, to have got the role of Betty Spencer in Some Others Do Often, which was a very, very popular, as it became, sitcom in the early 70s here with Michael Crawford in the lead. Had she got that, or had April Walker continued to remain in the cast, we never would have had Elisabeth Sladen as Sarah. So the fates were working with us and with her to make sure it was destined.
And as the director said at the time, he said, it's a good job she didn't get that Michelle Detrice, Betty Spencer role, because she was too strong. Yes. Liz Sladen was too strong. She doesn't do second fiddle. She's such a spirited person. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, it was better in the end, as I think we'd all agree, that she got the Sarah Jane Smith character. I'm always intrigued by, the April Walker thing, and the fact that she does say that, compared to John Pertwee, the Tom Baker years, that she felt John Pertwee was a bit sad that Katie had left. Yeah. And she felt as though she had to be more spirited. She had to be his equal. She had to balance with him. She had to work him. And I think you get that in the performance. She is on the
Yes.
top of her game to settle into it. And that first moment she gets out of the TARDIS in the 12th century, so to speak, she does that classic. She stands on the ground and she I tell you what, this woman, she thinks about her acting. They talk about her scripts being full of notes, don't they? And that moment she steps into 12th century England, she makes it a big moment because she does that kind of, where am I? How come I'm not somewhere else? The TARDIS has moved.
Still a police box. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also she goes off immediately to try and find the phone to phone her editor.
Yeah.
What they've got here as well is that what Liz
Yeah.
is doing straight away from the moment she starts this is she's building the character. She's been given this character on a piece of paper, and Sarah Jane Smith is this journalist. We all know that Sarah eventually becomes one of the top 3 journalists in the UK. She's an old-fashioned journalist. She won't do all this sensationalist stuff. She will go and research a story. She'll find the story. She'll hunt it out. She was the Lois Lane of Doctor Who, and that's the end of it. You know, she was going to get there. So here she smells a story. Good. She doesn't know exactly what she's getting. She's the same in the second story. She's in the dinosaur story. She can smell the story, and that's what often leads Sarah, with that incredible curiosity she has, into trouble. Well, one thing I really want to say though about that is that, as we're talking about the building of Sarah Jane Smith as a character, is that energy that you just touched on there, the energy that Liz brings to this. Now, all through her first series, the relationship that she's actually putting together here with the Third Doctor is so incredible, because you can see them, and he becomes fond of her very quickly through the first story, doesn't he? But you can see them developing that. They're building up, and it's just a joy to watch. So by the time they get to Death to the Daleks, they're a team. They're an absolute solid team. Sarah's become a little bit more confident with this ability to time travel. She's got used to the TARDIS now. She's still finding her feet, but she knows the Doctor's okay. They are absolutely on the way to becoming the bestest friends ever, aren't they?
Yeah, but people always cite the Sarah Jane Fourth Doctor dynamic as being, the quintessential dynamic of Doctor companion. But I think sometimes the Pertwee Sarah dynamic gets overlooked, and it's equally as warm as it is with Jo. I think different, very different, but just as warm, and it's a delight to watch.
Yeah, well, we're not going to overlook it on this show, because we're going to continue talking about the Pertwee season for a little bit longer. John's pointing out here that Sarah takes command of the scene with blood axe, walking around logically, trying to research and make sense of the surroundings. It's very well acted. It really, really is. And she's got a grip of this character immediately, has Liz. She knows Sarah.
Oh, it's some sort of pageant. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Stop acting. Stop this LARPing. This is ridiculous.
And of course, and of course, the women's lib thing can it could have been clunky, and it didn't end up being the case. She was she ended up advising the Queen on Thalura and in the Month of Peladon. She was kind of advising this Queen here, so to speak, and she trying to work out. She was just trying to be a woman of her time. That confidence, that kind of chutzpah to say, come on. And so just like you said, she couldn't believe she was in 12th century England. There had to be a logical reason to it. And of course, the other logical reason is nobody is second best. So while she was trying to be up to par with John Pertwee's Doctor, she was equally trying to work out the other female characters in these pieces about why they weren't stepping up. And it made a brilliant dynamic and formula for this character, because that wasn't the Jo Grant formula at all. This was a woman who really knew what she was all about.
Yeah, that's great, because I want to ask the guys, those of you that were actually watching this and can remember this properly, how long did it take you to adjust to the fact that Sarah was not the same as Jo?
Not long at all. Doctor Who is a program which is all about change, and even to young people, as we were at the time, and young people who watch it now, the program's constantly changing. Every few years, there's a new Doctor. Every year or two, there's a new companion. There's a new enemy to fight. There's a new season. There's a new opening title. And as happened latterly, a new version of the theme tune. The program is all about change. We are constantly being introduced to change and things that are new. So when you had a companion, which for me Jo Grant was the companion that I'd really sort of grown with into the programme. And then she was gone. This was going to be my first big loss, if you like, as an avid viewer of Doctor Who. So, if you like, everything was stacked against Elisabeth Sladen, the actress, for this, because a whole lot of people were going to say, she's not as good as Jo. Jo was there for 3 years. Jo wouldn't have done this. Jo would have done that better. So she had it all to lose. But she didn't, because she set the ground running by creating a completely different character, a completely different dynamic with the Doctor, which again, and the modern day series sort of thinks it introduced this, but again, with Sarah, you get reintroduced to the Doctor and all the concepts that surround the Doctor, which is great. And throughout that whole season, what happens is you see that arc, because it is an arc, between someone who begins with suspicion and downright mistrust of the Doctor, to a woman in episode 6 of Planet of the Spiders who grieves for the loss of her friend and cries and cries. And that's a huge journey that character makes. And she makes that journey in our hearts as well. And that, apart from the scripts and the work of Barry Letts and Terence Dicks and John Pertwee to lead it, that's down to Elisabeth Sladen as an actress. Because without her, we can only speculate, would we have taken to Sarah Jane Smith in the same way? I doubt it.
I totally agree with you. I mean, there's that danger, isn't it? Had it gone to a different actress who didn't have the ability, we wouldn't be talking about Sarah in the same way as we do today. She wouldn't have the affection of generations of us as Doctor Who fans who grew up with her. To this day, she is the Doctor Who companion to millions of us around the world, especially of a certain age. And it's interesting
not just those of a certain age, JT, because there's a whole just swathe of young people now. And I'll get into this later because of the Sarah Jane adventures and the fact that she continues.
Absolutely.
She's a companion for all seasons.
Oh, she is. And to point out what you were saying there as well, she was taking on a big task really at that time, because she was coming after Katie and Jo Grant. Yes. And this must have been nerve-wracking for her, because this was her first public appearance, of course, with John at the opening of the Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition. Now, we've talked about this in our 2023 summer special, which was all about the Blackpool exhibition. It's called Blackpool Days. Go and have a look at it if you haven't seen it already. But there she is, being introduced to Doctor Who fans and to the British public, and she must have been nervous. But you don't see it in any of the pictures, because the kids just automatically go, oh, that's the new girl. And this is before she's been seen on television. I was going to say, this is a few months before. Yeah, I mean, she must have been, but she pulled it off beautifully, of course. And there's fantastic pictures of the kids just going, oh my God, it's the Doctor and a new girl. Yeah. And and again, she would have charmed them just as Sarah Jane charmed all of us. Absolutely wonderful there. You were talking about, as we get through this period, as we start to look at what Sarah's doing and getting to, work with Pertwee and the Third Doctor, Sarah and the Third Doctor's relationship, you can start to see the makings of what happens here. And I would say to anybody coming into the show in this day and age, if you're a cast as a companion, this is the person you need to go and see. This is where it starts. Sarah Jane Smith is the pivotal Doctor Who companion. That's how you do it. That's the template. Is that something that you guys would think is fair enough to say?
Yeah, because she doesn't just blunder down corridors and get herself into silly fixes. She's a journalist. It's her curiosity that gets her into trouble. It's her eye for a story that gets her into trouble. So like in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, for example, when I think is at the end of part 3, one of the great cliffhangers, when of course she basically, she's only lost a few hours, but she thinks she's now in space 3 months later. And, it's the perils of Pauline, but the reason is her curiosity, her determination to sniff out a story. And it works then as a good dynamic with the Doctor, because she's not just needing help. She's not a girl in distress. She sometimes is going back with information. She's sometimes going back with a story. If the Doctor with Unit was kind of trying to work something out, she would bring more information. And it wasn't like when Jo Grant said, I've read something in the newspaper. She'd have actually been to the place. Yeah. So she just brought more to it, and therefore there was a kind of authenticity to her character because she wasn't somebody who always needed to be saving in that respect. She was somebody who might have got into trouble because she had an eye for a story.
I mean, the wonderful thing about this was this must have been a culture shock for all the youngsters that were watching at the time, because this character is different. Sarah is different because she spends most of the time trying to rescue the Doctor. I started to do the other day. I started to try and look at how many times she rescued the Doctor in the incarnation she knew, predominantly in Doctor Who. I've lost count because that's all she actually wanted to do. She was protecting her friend. She was protecting her best friend. And we see more of that when she starts to hang around more with the fourth incarnation, of course. But she gets into trouble herself. She can get herself out of it. But then she goes, oh, my God, I've got to go and rescue him now. I mean, you were talking there, John, about strong female characters. This was 1973 and 1974.
And that's
here
why
she is.
Yeah, that's why I always going to beam my bonnet when I hear sort of current writers and production crews talking about sort of old-fashioned Who, if you like, from the 70s, as if all they did was stand and scream and whatever. Yeah, that's not what happened. Yeah, there were a fair amount of that went on, but here was an opportunity for the production team to create a different character to the popular one of Jo. And Jo wasn't a terrible screamer either. She did a bit of screaming, but she was strong-willed, and by the end, she'd gone on an arc as well in terms of growing up from a young girl to a woman who's about to go off and have her own adventures in the Amazon. But they decided they would create this brand new character who, by giving her the sort of the hook of being a journalist, would perhaps open up stories going forward in the absence of units or whatever that would lead the Doctor into something. They didn't go down that way ultimately, but it still gave Sarah a purpose other than just being a part of units, landing on the Doctor or whatever. She had a life and a fully formed career of her own, and that made a huge difference. So I do get a bee in my bonnet when I hear people talk about classic Who, as they call it now, being a bit sexist and misogynist.
Totally.
It wasn't really. And Sarah Jane Smith is proof positive of that, because she's the one character above a whole swathe of other characters introduced since then and in the new show who transcends it all, who's remembered, and who is the template for many modern day companions.
And
as
she
well.
was
That's what I say.
She's the one we all aspire to.
Tardy Spider is here saying that they still had that dynamic. It was lucky enough to meet them. He's meaning Liz and John there, Sarah Jane and the third Doctor. If you want to know more about when he met them, you can go and look at our chit chat. Tardy Spider and I had a chit chat recently. He told me all about that when he met with them back in the 80s. That's a lovely story as well. It's fantastic. But no, you're absolutely fantastic. Jack is here, and Jack is saying it's a testament to both Liz and the character of Sarah Jane that she became a real hero to a whole new generation later in life. Yes, because the foundations were put down there in 73, not just because of fantastic writing, but the performance of the character. And that's why Sarah was beloved.
She was also, if you think about it, she was thrown into some amazing context for their early formative period. She was in medieval England, first of all, with Time Warrior, a kind of medieval Peladon. She was in a savage planet of Exelon. Those early episodes, she was always in a very dangerous, medieval, savage world, and she had to hold her own. She was a sacrifice in Exelon.
Liz would have been good at that because she was from Liverpool.
Yes, yes, definitely. I don't know about you guys as well, but there are certain elements of that period which are now, for me, having grown up with the images, this word is used a lot, but for this particular case, it's correct. They are iconic. And I'm going to share some with you, just a couple of my favorite pictures. This one I grew up with in the Doctor Who monster book from Target. And I only vaguely, do you know what I remember most, guys, from that story? I remember Sarah's jumper, because I had a similar one as a little boy with diamonds on it. And I remember that so much. I do vaguely remember the Ice Warriors, and by this point, of course, I'm in total love with Sarah Jane. She's my girl. And I was so worried Saturday after Saturday after Saturday because she was doing all sorts of things. And then the second iconic image for me to this very day is this.
Oh
yeah.
Well,
which she was terrified of, apparently.
Oh, can you blame her?
Even put it on the Target book, didn't they? Even though that's a spoiler.
That costume is one of those ones you constantly remember from Sarah Jane Smith. The jumper you mentioned there, JT, and that costume, because it comes complete with 8-leg accessory.
But looking at this, I mean, these things were in the Blackpool exhibition, weren't they? In that, and I remember being terrified because Sarah was. But when that thing got on her back, I absolutely remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
3 years
Me
old,
too.
everybody.
That's one of the moments.
Terrified me. Yeah, Michael. What about you?
No, sorry, that didn't interrupt. That's one of the moments that really scared me, actually, as a kid, and it scared her too. It jumped, and and as an Australian, it's more scary. Trust me, because the spiders here, the spiders in Doctor Who are almost as big as the ones we get here. So,
The other one's the toilet.
Yeah.
Don't. I mean,
I had one in
had
my car once
for years, simply because of the Metabila spiders and Planet of the Spiders, and because they went and got Sarah, and the bit where they put her in that cocoony thing.
Yeah. Well, she was, I remember John saying at a convention that I saw him at, and he said it plenty of times, that she was scared herself. She was arachnophobic, and they'd put a little spider on the table and go, "Oh, look at that," and she'd go, "Oh, yeah, great." And then they put a larger one, models, and then they'd incrementally get bigger and bigger and bigger until she was brave enough to get it on her back. And John said, Liz was very brave because she was absolutely terrified of them. So, and I don't blame her. I'm arachnophobic myself. So.
But just that image screams to this very day. That screams Doctor Who to me. I don't think you can beat that sort of thing.
And of course, we say this in a lot of these discussions, that when you get an iconic moment, you can tell it's iconic. There's no argument because it's replicated later. And that was replicated later in, was it Turn Left? When Donna had that beat on her back.
Beetle thing, it wasn't the same.
Emulated.
But they try and emulate a magical moment in Doctor Who, which this definitely was, because the size of that spider, didn't she face the Parliament of Spiders as well? Because the Queen Spider was the one who jumped on her, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Elizabeth Sladen was so scared of, that facing out any sort of spider that scuttles around or moves, she had to face a whole load of them. It was a fearful. I mean, I remember as a kid seeing that whole kind of room of spiders all moving. And when she was in that horrible kind of husk ready to be eaten, that was a blooming scary story. And she always delivered. The way she talks and the way she delivers her lines have so much raw emotion that you really believe it.
She has a very rare skill that actors she can convey strength and fear simultaneously. And it's extraordinary to watch. It really is.
It's the voice as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Liz was so good at bringing Sarah Jane to life.
As an old teacher,
wobble.
As an old teacher, she enunciates her words perfectly.
Yes,
you can actually see her.
Yeah,
in her mouth.
Yeah. But there's that whole thing about, Sarah is brave. She's gutsy. She's out there. As I said before, all she cares about when they're off is she's got to look after the doctor. Something comes out here, and Liz always said it was because, well, wouldn't you do that for your best friend? Yes, you blooming well would. And the magic is she understands that. It doesn't matter what face he's wearing, because she does meet several doctors. Let's not forget that. It doesn't matter what face he's wearing. That's her best friend. She recognizes the thing inside the Time Lord, and she'll do anything for him. And that's the magical thing. But I love the fact that Sarah's always like, I mean, she could be face to face with a Dalek or whatever, and she's there. You're not going to. But I'm terrified inside.
And that's
so beautiful.
And that's what makes her a really three-dimensional character. Isn't it? I mean, these days you'll get characters who are strong and powerful, and there's no fallibility whatsoever, and it makes them very two-dimensional. And as I said, Sarah was strong, but she was also fallible. She could also get scared. And that's what made her a three-dimensional character.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Brendan, you wanted to talk about something to do with the Death to the Daleks. Is that one of your favourite Sarah moments?
Yeah, because we talk about the stripes on the back, and I think we all know the costume she was in. And it wasn't about the costume in Death to the Daleks. It's just that as I'm starting to kind of work out Sarah remember, the job of a companion is to take the kids along. Really, she's the human contact and to explain things and all the rest of it, and to show the fallibilities of humanity. And I mean, there was a moment in Monster of Peladon when she made friends and apologized to Alpha Centauri for judging Alpha Centauri when they hit them with all their legs. But in Death of the Daleks, I loved the fact that Bilal was lovely with her, and she just took to Bilal as if he was just another fella or neighbour from down the road who took the milk in. She just
Could you
talked to
imagine?
him
Could
as
you
a
imagine?
normal person.
After the initial shock, though, it was
yeah. But she adopted this little Exelon, and of course, as a little kid, you're going, "Oh, she's lovely, she's sensitive, she's kind, she's my friend." Those little moments when she apologized to Alpha Centauri, and when she befriended Bilal, and seemed so kind. I wanted to be her friend. That's when the companion grabs the viewer.
Yeah, I think she brought that across because you were her friend. We were all her friend, and I don't think there's any of us that didn't fall in love with Sarah, because she was strong. She was a role model to both boys and girls. She was the best friend of the Doctor. They were having fun together. There was none of this modern day nonsense that was in there either. They were just having fun together. They were getting into danger together. They were looking after each other, but we were with her. And as a little boy, I was so protected to Sarah. And I think that's why my love for Sarah lasts this very, very day. Paul, are you back with us? Are you still in 1980?
I could be in probably 1970 with two bits of string and two cans, really. It's not that great. So
chip in when you can, my friend.
Just in case, I'll do what I can. But if I start sounding like Norman Collier, and John can explain who he is, and see what happens with that. But yeah, so I finally get a word in edges because it's working just now. While it's working, everyone shush for a minute. Okay, and my memories of Elisabeth Sladen, particularly, shush you. Right, so my first images, I remember the Radio Time special from the 10th anniversary, that fantastic shot of Sarah and Lynx on the battlements of the castle, and that image has stuck with me for a very long time. It's a great image and a great iconic picture from that era and the start of her beginnings as Sarah, and she is so superb in the Time Warrior. Like we said earlier, she's feisty. She's got the suspicion of the Doctor. She doesn't believe who he is, and she really questions him. And that's a great start to the series, and really gives her a feisty character as the journalist we mentioned earlier. But she goes through, like you said, JT, when she gets to Planet Spiders, she is grieving the Doctor that she's about to lose to the radiation from the Great One. Fantastic, great performance, great actor, and I agree with what Mike was saying as well about the people often don't mention the relationship between John and Liz. It's always Tom and Liz, but I think they have a great rapport, and it builds really well, and it really sets her up for the next dynamic with Tom, and then she really settles in, and she's perfect, the best companion ever.
I don't know if you would agree with this. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. I don't know if you'd agree with this, Paul, but when it comes to Sarah, I think the photograph I showed before, where is it? There it is. I think this photograph encompasses what Pertwee always wanted from his Doctor and how he played the third Doctor, because the third Doctor with Joe was quite fatherly in a sense, and we know now, that image captures exactly what the third Doctor was about. He was the the mother hen type with all the the chickens around him, but Sarah fits into that beautifully, because the third Doctor does have to adapt slightly to the fact that this young lady is different to any of his previous companions, because this one comes and goes, and then she'll come in and she'll say something, and then she won't do what she's told necessarily in a different style. There is a different dynamic for, and he does adapt to it, but the dynamic between those two is incredibly different to the dynamic between these two. The legends are the fourth Doctor and Sarah. For me, the pairing of Doctor Who ever. Nobody can ever beat this for me. What do you guys think of this?
Oh, priceless, superb, utterly superb.
It is. It's the gold standard. That's the only way of describing it. If Pertwee and Liz Sladen together were, sort of the nursery slopes for this relationship, this is where we hit. We hit the big time here. with Tom Baker and Liz Sladen, and of course Ian Marta for part of that time too. It's I don't know if it's serendipity. I don't know if it's their skill as actors. I don't know if it's the skill of the production team, or if it's all of those things. But this is as close to perfection as television got in the 1970s, because these are people who just know exactly the buttons to press. They know exactly the dynamic of the parts they're playing and how they fit together. Now, interestingly, Liz does change Sarah. Sarah is different. Yes. It's not a rapid change, but she does change. And she doesn't change just because Sarah's growing. She changes because the Doctor changes, and her relationship with the fourth Doctor is a different one, a different dynamic from that with the third Doctor. No, it doesn't have to be better. It's better in terms of how we view it and all the rest of it. In terms of how she fits together with her best friend, changes. Yes. And that probably for us, if you think about this, is the first time we really ever see that happen in Doctor Who. That, you know, a companion has had so long with one Doctor and then goes into the next. And I know Ben and Polly did it with the first Doctor, but I'm not really going to include that. I think as a one-on-one best friend sort of relationship, this is the first time this happens. And we see that relationship change between the third and the fourth Doctors. And as a result, grow stronger, because this Doctor, the fourth Doctor, gets her into even more perilous situations than she's ever been with the third Doctor. She's now officially out in space for the best part of a couple of years with a brief return to Earth. And these two are looking out for each other. These two, at the same point, they're having fun, best friends having fun, but my goodness, they're covering each other's backs. And we, as the viewers, be we 10 years old or 110 years old, just love to see that. We can love the story, we can love the monster of the week, but we've got a vested interest in these two people because we love them. And that's the reason why that's
what happened. You've gone from Pertwee and Sladen, which was establishment Doctor, where she's trying to fit in with that kind of, you know, he's all for establishment. She's a journalist. She's cutting against the establishment. Then you get the Tom Baker Doctor, who's very bohemian, very unpredictable, very out there, very alien. And so she has to adapt to that anyway. And I just think, the closest anyone got to it, look, everything you've said, I'm not going to just replicate because there's no need to, because I've already said earlier on, these were the halcyon days. This was the golden couple. This was the peak of classic Doctor Who. Tennant and Donna Noble were acted as almost like equals, and that's when it was fun again, when they were like brother and sister. And I thought the Tom Baker Liz Sladen pairing was more of equals, and she would give us good to get on. And you know, he was able, we've mentioned in our Archive in Space review, where he provokes her because he understands her. And she knows when he's done that to her. So, you know, there's a bit of slap around and you rotter. And it is, I think it's more like siblings. I really do. And I think that's why John's right about this is the golden couple, because we don't need the blooming romance. We don't need to go down that side avenue. We want people to respect each other.
And that relationship was established very quickly in episode 1 of Robot. Like they didn't muck around. They got it was pretty much as soon as he's, and Sarah Jane, well, now, isn't this nice? From that point on, boom.
You're totally right, Michael. And to hit the ground running that quickly, it shows again the fact that these actors got on, they clicked. And at this point, as John was saying, there's 3 of them, which is brilliant. I want to talk about her, Sarah and Harry, because that's a beautiful relationship there as well. But one thing, I'm going back to John's point there, what we're saying about Sarah, is she does change. I totally agree with you. And you can see it, because here comes Sarah with the fourth Doctor, and she responds to this bohemian fun guy. This guy just wants to go and have fun, and Sarah's like, right, don't stop me, I'm coming with you. You know, she's all the way there. She adores this version of the Doctor. He's not as restricted as his previous incarnation either. You know, even in his dress sense, he's a little bit more casual, a little bit more laid back, a bit more sort of like, right, let's go with this. And he is a rebel, this Doctor, and she gets that. But there's some pieces here I wanted to point out to you guys, because obviously you've noticed this, but we've talked about briefly in the Ark in Space there. She has the idea for running the cables from the shuttle, doesn't she? From the rocket.
Yeah.
That's her idea. The Doctor's almost dismissive of it. Do you remember? And then suddenly, what was that, Sarah? And he's so proud of her. And she's just like, waiting to turn there because she's getting used to this new version of him. That's magical. I just think that performance and that whole thing and the way that the Fourth Doctor reacts to Sarah at that point, he knows he does love this woman. He loves this human being, doesn't he?
Well, that extra dimension to the acting, that extra dimension to the scene only comes from the dynamic between those two actors playing off each other. And I think had it been April Walker, who knows what it would have been like. Had it been Fulton Mackay instead of Tom Baker, who knows what would happen. But because we get Liz Sladen, because we get Tom Baker, and those two actors just gel immediately, you get the sort of magic you get in those little non-scripted moments, JT, that you talked about there, where Sarah has the idea, and it's just that look back at each other, and you can see in Tom's face, the Fourth Doctor's face, she's my pal, and I'm proud of her because look what she's just done. Fantastic.
Yeah. John's saying here he knew who tried to portray Sarah and the Doctor as romantically interested, but he never saw that as brand. None of us ever saw that. Yeah, I mean, there was. I just said they did love each other, but it was that other. It was that wholesome sort of love. It's brought out in the Hand of Fear. Well, I worry about you. Well, I worry about you. That's all you need to do. That shows that the Doctor is an alien. But it shows that with Sarah, something absolutely got to him, and he was very protective.
She challenged his moral scruples. This is where I think it's the equality thing. She challenged his moral scruples. The very famous scene in Genesis of the Daleks. There were two people in that scene. She was challenging him. Do I have the right is the famous bit with the Tom Baker Doctor, but she was the one saying, you cannot doubt it. This is about the Daleks. If this was a bacteria, there's some great lines that she's given, and she gives it with gusto. Yeah. These are two actors who are both absolutely exploding the dialogue, and she is challenging his moral scruples. She is up there. Look, how can you think like this, Doctor? This is serious. You're talking about the Daleks. We have a mission. We have this, and she Sarah Jane, Liz Sladen is absolutely firing on those lines. So Tom Baker can just whack back. That's the rapport. These are really firing on all cylinders.
I'm just thinking there, Brendan, that perhaps in modern day, what we might have got. Can you quickly put those two wires together, and then we can go and get some chips?
Yes. And therefore missing out the drama and the danger.
And we know her mother.
Sorry, Michael.
No, sorry. I was going to say, then we know her family and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, all Sarah had, of course, was Aunt Lavinia. The infamous Aunt Lavinia that we didn't get to see until 1981, for crying out loud. Well, that was fine with me. Can I just point out, if I may, guys, one of my treasured memories, in a sense, because it was logged in there because I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And as we know, when you're scared, it stays with you forever. And to this very day, I have problems watching this particular scene and this particular story. Here I am at 53 and the emotion comes back in because my girl was being tortured by this brute. And this was so disturbing. This horrible thing put her under so much pressure and so much pain. Even the Doctor was worried about her. That has stayed with me and affected me my entire life. And it's down to the love and adoration I had for Sarah. This is the third story with the Fourth Doctor, and I'm gripped. I am absolutely there as a 4-year-old, remembering all this so much. It's clear as crystal in my head this season. I was totally besotted with these characters and totally in love with Sarah. And that thing, he had the cheek to put her in pain.
And what a cheek.
Well, I mean, look at it. But you know what I mean, though? The effect that had. Oh, man, I hate those stories. I hate that episode.
I remember.
Go on, Paul.
So I was going to say, I remember that the cliffhanger or the recap to part 2 of that story, when she thinks Star is Lynx, and that moment's brilliant. And then she lets out a scream when he kills the astronaut, and he says, "Why did you make that disagreeable noise?" And it's her performance is fantastic. The reaction to the Sontaran, like the viewer, my God, they're back. oh my God, it's the same. No, they're not the same, and it's that kind of fantastic moment we share with her as a viewer at her shock of seeing the Sontarans again. It's a fantastic moment, and just the moving the helmet off, and then she sees him for the first time since the Time Warrior. Fantastic stuff and great performance. And like you were saying, JT, about the torture scene, that is beautifully played, because it's a very difficult scene to play with all the nightmares and all the kind of visions that she sees and the creeping mud and all that kind of stuff, and the snake. Oh, incredible. Sorry, Michael, carry on.
No, I was going to say Liz Sladen was such a great reactor as an actor.
Yeah.
She was so good at reacting to what was in front of her and what was being said to her. Just phenomenal.
Well,
that's a really good point, actually, Michael. So that's a good point, Michael, because she not just Liz Sladen here, but she understands Sarah. She got Sarah completely for all that time, And you're talking about the reactions that Liz would do, but that comes through in Sarah as a character, because actually she met the Sontarans 3 times, and on each time she reacts because she retains the memory. So the first time she meets Lynx, then she gets another one which shocks her style, but by the time she gets to the third one in Sarah Jane Adventures, which is what was his name, Krog, I have it written down somewhere, but I can't remember. She knows these things are dangerous. Yeah. She knows these things are dangerous. She knows that she's got to be careful. She knows what they can do. There's a point where actually Krog says, right, I need to continue some experiments here. He suggests that, and that's when it gets back, because Sarah remembers. She remembers. She says, no, that's not going to happen. You stay away from these people, because I love that. And it brings the viewer back. It certainly brought me back to those horrible moments.
I find it resonant, and I don't want to jump later, but it's resonant. For example, if you think about the first time she sees Davros in that cave, or that ruin at the end of episode 1, one of the great moments in Doctor Who history, when you had that clan of the music and they whizzed across the Dalek, but you saw Davros for the first time. You got her reaction, which was more kind of facial reaction then. But then you jump to, what was it, Stolen Earth, and you got her holding Luke Smith, crying her eyes out, thinking, how the hell is planet Earth going to get out of this mess? Because she could hear, that the Daleks were attacking, and then later on she heard Davros's voice. And what you were saying about how she dealt with the Sontarans as she went through, she still tapped in. So if I was a young viewer watching Stolen Earth and Journey's End, Sarah Jane was telling me Davros and the Daleks are lethal and dangerous, and she knows.
Well, her reaction in those stories that you mentioned, it's almost a post-traumatic stress reaction, which is, when you think about it, probably what would happen. You're with her. You're with her the whole way, you think. And she gives it that gravitas. She gives the danger real verisimilitude. It's not just, one of my biggest complaints these days is that everybody, all the characters feel like they know they're in a show called Doctor Who, and it's almost like a wink at the camera. But she played it for real and straight, and it worked.
And that's why it was terrifying, wasn't it, for all of us? I mean, we have reviewed, we've just spoken about it, but I want to touch back on it as well, because the Ark in Space. John, you wanted to talk about climbing through the ducts and stuff like that.
We did mention this, just a little plug, when we reviewed the Ark in Space. Still available, folks. If you want to go and look that out.
Like, share, subscribe.
It is, absolutely. And what apart from Sarah being the one who has the idea of running this cable through the vents, when she, as we all would, gets exasperated and gets stuck and gets exhausted, and it's the Doctor, because he knows her, and he knows her faults and frailties and all the rest of it, who prods and cajoles and verbally abuses her into geeing her up to finish this task. And as she says herself, fell for it again. She knows this man is not going to think badly over that. This man does not feel she's in any way the weaker sex or the weakest link or whatever. But she falls for it because in the moment she's taken by the pressure that she's under. And he has to find a way bringing her back to be the person that he knows that she is. And that's exactly what he does. And while at the same point she does fall for it again, isn't she grateful for it? Because I doubt very much she would allow anybody else to do that, apart maybe from Harry, who she was very forgiving of as well. But nonetheless, between those two, you get, again, in that little scene, an encapsulation of how much they mean to each other and how much they know each other, because he knows by performing this act of, silliness and cajolingness on her, if that is such a word. I'm sure English teacher Brendan will pull me up for it if it's not. But if it is, then he knows it's going to work, and she will forgive him for it because it's done for the best of motives.
I think you're absolutely right there. But the thing again with Sarah is she retains her experience. She understands her experience. We eventually get to Skaro, of course, where they're split up very, very quickly. Harry and the Doctor go one way. Sarah is left for dead in the wastelands. She has to find her own way, but she does. Her prime mission is, of course, to find the Doctor, to get back to the Doctor and find them. But the things that she has to do to achieve that, she runs into the Mutts, the Mutos. She runs into all of those. She makes a friend. She gets captured, and then what does she do when she gets captured? She only leads a revolution. Now that's Sarah, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
That was another one of those genuinely scary moments, like the spiders. As a kid, I remember thinking, being very, very anxious about that ascent. It was real. It felt real.
Yeah,
because she played it real.
When they had the freeze frame that she fell. That was up there for me for what the hell, and worried that she might die up there with the deadly assassin freeze frame when he was underwater, because she's fallen off the climbing frame. That's it, isn't it? I couldn't work out in the playground at school how the hell she could get out of that.
Well, none of us could. I remember that Monday, and there must have been 7 or 8 of us. All of that. What's happening to Sarah? We were all so absolutely, desperately worried what was going to happen to Sarah, because we didn't know what freeze frame was back then, but it just stopped, and then, the music comes in, and you're, no! What is going to happen? What's going to happen?
And we knew from primary school you needed a crash mat, and she didn't have one.
No, she didn't. And she was really high. She was really, really, really high up there. Wasn't she? She was all the way up there. Those people scared the hell out of us as kids.
I don't want to dominate this.
We nearly got Leela 2 years early.
When she was on the climbing frame and the man got shot next to her.
Yes,
and a scream, and then she tries to get herself right again.
That was the moment.
Yes, absolutely.
That was the moment that scared me as a kid. Yeah.
We've got some comments from everybody watching. Hello to everybody watching. Thank you for joining us for Companion Piece, all about Sarah Jane Smith and Elisabeth Sladen here. John is he's saying here, the Khaled being shot and falling really puts you on an edge before that fall. It does, because suddenly Doctor Who's dangerous, because these guns are shooting people around Sarah, and you do suddenly realize, oh, actually, this it's dangerous with being with the Doctor at times. Time Lord 2023 is here. Hello, Time Lord 2023. Sarah Jane Smith is a true inspiration, and her legacy will continue to live on. Best Doctor Who episode with the Doctor and Sarah Jane for me is Pyramids of Mars. Come and see us again next month, because we will be reviewing Pyramids of Mars in Who's Views Reviews in just a few short weeks. So stay with us on that one, because it is a classic, isn't it, that one? And TARDIS Spider is here saying, Sarah is all of this because the structure of the storytelling allowed fully building characters. It really did. And when you're given something like that, and you can see the character for the actor must think it's a gift, because here we are looking at, this is proper Doctor Who. This is classic Doctor Who with a good Doctor and good characters, a good companion. John?
JT, yes, sorry. I was about to say, the mistake of the last iteration of Doctor Who, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, I don't want to talk about it at all.
Please don't.
is that they told and didn't show. In this version of Doctor Who, it's show, don't tell. We know what sort of person Sarah is because she does it. She acts it. She does it in situations. She becomes the revolutionary. She becomes the best friend. She becomes the villain's nemesis. Through all of this, she does it. We don't need to be told, right, this is my best friend, I love her, or this is the best person in the world, and she's the bravest person I've seen. Which is what we got recently in the last few years. Ugh. We can make our own minds about Sarah because we saw what she did.
Well, we travelled with her.
Indeed, and if we could, at some point, I don't want to jump ahead, I noticed we mentioned the Pyramids of Mars. If we can go back to that shortly, there's something I would truly like to mention about that.
Yes, please, we will do. We will do, please. We will be talking about the Pyramids of Mars of this because we're here to talk all about Sarah. I do want to mention this beautiful piece, though, that we have just touched upon. But this relationship is also beautiful. It's got to be mentioned. The relationship between Sarah and Harry is just beautiful. You can watch it today and get so much out of it. There is never anything as gorgeous as these two, and with Tom added into this, with the fourth Doctor added into it. But here we have a brother and sister. I mean, you know, the charm of Harry is that he feels he has to look after Sarah, but it's actually very much the other way around, isn't it? I mean, come on, it's Sarah looking after Harry again because she's got this now. She knows what she's doing. Yes, she's got the whole target. She also understands that Harry can a little bit clumsy here.
Yeah.
But the dynamite, I mean, you're never going to get that again in a month of Sundays anywhere, are you?
No. There'd be undercurrents of tension or sexual tension. Or...
I don't think that would be. It's such a shame.
It's a very old-fashioned sort of 1950s British movie type relationship. You know, Harry's terribly stiff upper lipped, and Sarah just treats him, you know, as like some errant schoolboy. It's brilliant. The point I would like to make about those two is that I have this terrible sort of I wonder what if, I wonder, I'm glad they didn't attitude towards this, because in the same way that I am so disappointed that Harry Sullivan and Ian Martin were written out as early as they were, I still think it would have been nice to have seen how that could have all have developed. But that might also mean we might not have had the fully developed Dr. Sarah relationship that we got in seasons 13 and 14.
Well, it's the whole turn left thing, isn't it? You're just never going to know.
What if turn left? Yeah. But
I do love the fact that
had Harry been an occasional visiting character still, that we might get a bit more of. That might have been nice.
I think that would have happened. I mean, we will be coming to the Sarah Jane Adventures as well. I mean, Sarah does reference Harry in the Sarah Jane Adventure. Oh, I loved him, and that said it all. It implied that Harry has now passed on, but he did great work and what have you, and that's fantastic. But I loved Harry, and she did, and every moment you can see that. But what gets me about that beautiful relationship, of course, is that this is where actually we start to get a little bit funny. These characters are so perfect. They are so good to each other. And I've got so many instances that I'm going to throw into this show of where the humor is spot on, Who viewers. And this is one of them, where Harry and Sarah are on Voga and they are chained up by gold to a rock. And basically, Harry implies something about Sarah, and she turns around and she says, "My ankles are not thick." I mean, it's just brilliant. And then when he says to her, "Right, okay, we can get out. You know, this is a very soft metal. We can get out of here." Well, we can't just sit here glittering, then, can we? I love it. I just absolutely love that. Let's do something about it. I mean, these two. Wow,
the humor.
It's a fantastic look that Sarah's giving Harry. It says it all. If you can just flash that up again, it's a fantastic picture. The look she's giving Harry is just, that sums it up. Oh, for goodness sake, you know.
Yeah, it's a fantastic expression, isn't it? Look at it.
Yeah. They were allowed to adapt their dialogue a bit, though, weren't they? Because Ian Marter used to look after Liz and say, "You're not much in this scene. We'll have to write your part up if we can." And I got the impression that some of these lovely little touches was, if you know what actors say, if you're in the shot, make it worthwhile. And I think their repartee between them, which I think it's well spotted, JT, because the Voga stuff's brilliant. The way she. I mean, it has to be sibling rivalry. It has, the way I wanted to put it regarding the Doctor, Harry and Sarah was that Sarah was still tomboy and getting out there, and Harry was still old-fashioned and struggling with adapting a bit, which the Doctor used to tell him off for as well, didn't he? So you had Harry who was struggling to adapt a bit, but Sarah was fully adapted and thinking, "Come on, for God's sake, away." And it was that element of, Harry was just plundering along, and she was, "Come on, this is how you do it when you're in space." And there was that element to it. But I do think they must have touched up their dialogue a bit, because it's so on point.
Well, they're just so good together. I want to bring in Gary Bryant's in the chat here. He says that Sarah was the big sister that all the boys wanted on their side.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think a lot of the boys, depending on your age, you either fancied her or you wanted to look after her, or possibly even both. I don't know. That we've got that there. Sudoku24 says, clearly, Harry thought he was in a chance. I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure. Do you remember the bit in Ark in Space? If you call me old girl again, I'm going to spit in your eye.
Just punching above his weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sudoku 24 is also saying here he would have loved to have seen the Scratchman movie Happy just for one more Harry adventure. I mean that would have been brilliant had we had the fourth Doctor, Sarah and Harry on the big screen again. Can you imagine that chemistry, those beautiful relationships as a movie? We'd still be talking about it today, wouldn't we? I'm not sure what this one's about. Oh yeah, here we go. John saying microphone scene at the end as the station was heading towards Voga. Brilliant. What do you mean by that exactly? John, the microphone scene. Again, it's Harry, isn't it? You know, he's on Voga. The Doctor and Sarah are on.
She's talking in Never Beacon. She's talking to Harry on Voga. And I think he's wittering on, and she gets a bit abrupt with him again.
He says something like, "Are you aware you're about to crash into us?"
Yes,
that's right.
She says, "Yes, ever so slightly."
Yeah, that's what...
Yeah, look at that again. Look at her face. Look at that expression. She's not. Yeah, she's not playing it for laughs. She's playing it
but we
very,
can get
very
the laugh
straight.
out of it because it is just brilliant. Isn't it?
No, but I mean, she's not hamming it up.
She's going to kill him. She's going to kill him.
Yeah, I mean,
she's getting the laughs, but she's not playing for the laughs. That's what I mean. She's not yucking it up.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another point, again, just showing some humor that I've always remember and I always want to refer to, and it involves Sarah with the fourth Doctor, and it's just a brilliant comic moment because it just shows you how great these people are when it comes to actually delivering the comic lines. I'm trying to find the graphics, so bear with me. It's there somewhere. It'll appear in a minute. I'll tell you anyway. Oh, here it is. This bit. Now, this is one of my favorite bits in Terror of the Zygons, where Sarah comes in and she tells him that the brig is down at the rig doing something there if he's interested. And then he goes, and she says, "Yeah, I thought you might be." And then she asks him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "This is part of the radio probe system used for checking localized jamming." And then she turns around and says, "Well, what if that gets jammed too?" And again, it's just, and then he looks at her. He's got that sort of, he's got that look. And she just goes, and she laughs it off brilliantly because she's teasing him. By this point in their relationship, she can tease him. It's fantastic.
And when she does the mock Scottish accent when she answers the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to dare try to do a Scottish accent here. That's for sure.
Hello to the Timescales that's just joined us from San Francisco. Hello.
Give it a go, Michael. Give it a go.
Thank you for joining with us. And John's going on about the bit that we've just talked about on the arc. Yes, and she gives that sarcastic face. Yes, Harry. I mean, it's just brilliant. Sudoku is saying here that Sarah doesn't suffer fools gladly. She does not, does she? Really? You know, but there comes a point where she's just a bit sort of like, "Ooh, okay, you're trying my patience now."
But it reminds me of the bit that it's on YouTube, isn't it? When she's interviewed by a journalist, Liz Sladen, and she talks about, if a Dalek's up your backside, you're not going to hang around. You can see the spirit in Liz Sladen anyway, and the Scouse background. She's taking no crap.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We have to say that Sarah actually isn't from Liverpool. Sarah, it turns out, is from a wee place in England, which has now been recreated into the London Borough, which was actually Foxgrove. This is all brought out in the Sarah Jane Adventures. She was born in a little hamlet, if you like, called Foxgrove in the 50s. No longer there because they ran a blooming motorway or something through it. But hey, there's a bit of trivia for you about Sarah. That's just of its time, isn't it? What did you guys think when this happened?
Oh, terrified.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love the cyber. I love the Return of the Cybermats and Revenge of the Cybermen. They look like they've got flares, I think, but they're very good. But I do think that I was gobsmacked when she was bitten by the Cybermat, and we thought, how's she going to get out of this? Because the other guy got poisoned. You know, the guy who was the crew member. So and he died. So and all the crew died. They all thought, what's going to happen? And then they take her down to Voga via the Transamat to try and purify her system, which was fantastic, and she survived. All thanks to Harry and the Doctor.
She struggles
it's a
well.
great scary moment, and the Cybermats are great and scary in the story.
Yeah, her breathing. I mean, look, we're talking about the actress as well, aren't we? I mean, she's a great character, and she's a damn good actress, and she's delivering. I mean, you know, you showed me the Cybermat attacking her, and as a kid, you're watching that, going, "Why are you watching telly? What you doing? What you doing?" It's a bit like Ark in Space. Her character, because she's curious, she was listening to the President of Earth maybe for too long and got blooming, you know, spooked up and blooming frozen. And then in this one, she's watching too much blooming telly. And then this Cybermat, you know, behind you. It was classic Panto, and of course grabs her neck, and then after that. Oh, you had that lovely vein effect. But my God, because as a kid, I didn't know about the space plague then from the previous Cybermen. This was my first time. And to see her breathing and struggling, and you know, you think, God, not again. Perils appalling. She's in big doo-doo.
And again, she's reacting so very well. JT, that photo you just put up, could you just pop it up again? Look at it and think of that photograph of Sigourney Weaver in Aliens.
Yeah,
it's similar kind of realism there.
It's believability. She believes in this.
Yeah, and a wonderful reactor. She's just tremendous.
Yeah.
But it comes across, doesn't it? Because all these images you retain, and again, that's another one of the ones. I was really disappointed when Revenge of the Cybermen came out on video. Because I remember being terrified of these big silver things, and I knew that Sarah was attacked again. It didn't have the same effect on me as the Sontaran one did, because that was gruesome. That was a bit more violent, a bit more in your face, really.
Visceral.
Whereas and it was done through malice. The Sontaran knew what he was doing. This Cybermat thing, was a piece of tin, and also by that point, I sort of knew that. Hang on a minute. The Doctor was just round the corner, which I didn't know with the Sontaran. I somehow knew she was going to be all right, but it stays with you. And it was the performance that stays with you, you know? And again, going back to that beautiful relationship, of course, they get rid of the poison by the Doctor beaming them down, different franchise, but there we go. Teleporting them down, different franchise, but there you go. Then taking them down to the planet. Harry's carrying her. And what's her initial reaction? What are you doing? It just gets me. And he's, oh, well, that's fine. Thank you very much. It was just perfectly played, and it just shows you that relationship. But what does Sarah do eventually? Well, we all know what Sarah has to do. Going back to what we were saying, Hugh viewers, she has to go and get her best friend. And by God, that leads her into that trouble, doesn't it? But she's still there, isn't she? She's going for it. She's going back. She's going to save the Doctor. I love all this. I love the fact it's always down to Sarah.
And I love that she's dressed appropriately for space travel. Like, you know, none of the high hits. She's wearing fatigues and boots and everything. It's great.
These were the great costumes at Genesis and Revenge. She was in the right. Sontaran Experiment with the little kind of yellow top and the jumper. I thought she had a great look. Can I just, before you leave season 12, can I just say in Robot, I was scared stiff as a kid that she was in a dark room with that robot and she was believing in it and she felt sorry for it. And what sort of actress? I mean, come on. I think sometimes this is when Doctor Who and other sci-fi shows, you know, gets the Mickey taken out of it. This is so hard to act, isn't it? You have to believe in a piece of metal. You have to believe in this piece of metal on your neck. And the giant robot, when she was there and she was talking to it, and she even managed to get across emotion that she cared for it. She didn't want it to die. I remember the end of Robot when she kind of wasn't happy that it was killed. And I really felt for that. I thought, yeah, that's terrible because of the way she projected that.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right there, because, you know, Sarah's heart's broken at this point, isn't it? It's as though she's, with the robot, she has actually taken, you know, the time to build a relationship with it. She's trying to understand it. She sort of speaks to it as though it's a child in a way. I think Sarah sees that in this robot. She sees the fact that, you know, well, hang on a minute, this thing is doing what it's told to do. She gets the point that this this whole robot, it's being controlled by human beings. So it must be an awful time for Sarah when she suddenly realized, well, these human beings are making this thing do what it doesn't want to do. It knows it's doing wrong.
Yeah.
But it's the doctor that rescues her on that occasion, isn't it? With that famous thing, are you going to, I mean, again, that the moment she takes the jelly baby, you know, you're in for a rollicking good series here, because she's off. She's going with him. And that whole, the way they do that is brilliant. None of this faffing around. It's the case, do you want a jelly baby? Yep, I'm coming with you. Sign me up. It's just, I just think it's absolutely fantastic. Now, Brendan wanted to talk about this.
Oh, well, by this point, she is your big sister. By the way, it was only when I was doing the research the other day, I thought, oh my God, she's the same age as my dad. And there must be an element where she was like, you know, she's like your parent too, because on the age thing, you know, that doesn't change. But this, again, this actress has to show when she's hypnotized, in a trance, when she's a robot, when she's possessed, when, you know, she goes through the gamut. I have to say, they really pushed her. And as Philip Hinchcliffe said in various documentaries and interviews, she knocks it out the park. She is top notch. And in The Brain of Morbius, I mean, you talked about the sometime experiments, JT. I get that. I do get those moments because we were around at the same time, and these are scary years. But in The Brain of Morbius, when she was blinded by that ring, by the Sisters of Khan, that really got to me, because yet again, I fell for it as a fan. I thought she was blind, and how do we get out of this? Because she delivered it so authentically. And you know how she's trying to move around. And of course, there are a few different steps to this. Number one, you've got Sarah's blind, but then number two, when she's stuck down the stairs, she fell, didn't she? And then the next minute is she's stuck in a room with, it just so happens, a Time Lord who's just happens to be a brain in a jar with that fantastic voice. And of course, that was what was registering, because she didn't know where he was. And there's that lovely moment, or scary moment, when she's walking towards the brain in the jar, but she doesn't know she is because she's blind. And that lovely, well, I keep saying lovely, but it's well acted. That moment when they're sat at the table with Morbius, and he makes a face to Tom Baker saying, no, she's incurable. And she sat there. Honestly, I was willing her on in that, because, I mean, number one, these are hard things to do. I'm sure when they go to acting school, you know, be a wind, be a tomato. But the thing is, she's in a trance, she's possessed, all these things. She delivers. And you never really think, oh, God, that's a bit of weak acting there. You every time I fell for it as a kid, and I fell for this one, I thought she's blind, we're stuffed.
I'm still laughing. Still laughing at being a tomato. Sorry.
But what's driving her at this point? I was going to say, in that picture there, look, this picture here, she's out and about. She's managed to get out of Solon's castle. She's got down that blooming, you know, hill thing it's on, the mountain it's on. She's now going around this. She's trying to find her way to the cavern of the sisterhood. But what's driving her? She's rescuing the doctor. She's blind. She's on an alien planet. She's surrounded by all this stuff. She knows there's dead bodies everywhere. She knows she's being hunted as well, to an extent as well. Nothing's going to stop her. The blindness doesn't. She's going after her best friend, and she's going to. Oh my goodness!
And
what
again,
a woman!
And again, in that photograph, look at her face. She says so much with her face. All the shots you've shown, there's you know exactly what's going on purely from her expression.
Yeah, absolutely. And the determination from here. This was Sarah, wasn't it? Go on, Paul.
I was going to say, when she gets her sight back and sees the body of the Chop Suey, the Black Emperor, that's incredible. Yeah, Chop Suey. She the reaction to that when she gets her sight back, and then the cliffhanger is amazing. And like Michael's been saying all along, she's a great reactor to things, and when she reacts to that monster, it's a great moment, and it's a really scary moment, because Brain of Morbius scared the hell out of me. I remember being a very, very scary story. Even scarier now with the Timeless Children, and that's another story on top of that.
No, we won't talk about that. Don't want to talk about that. But it is a scary story. But we've also got this as well. Gary's saying here, Liz was a great old movie buff, so took inspiration from classic Hollywood movies like King Kong and old Universal horror movies. Yeah. And just as well for this season, eh, Michael?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just thinking as you were talking there, Paul. We don't want to get into the new stuff, but that the modern day storytelling trope of quips to a scary alien. Oh, let's make a Joss Whedon-esque smart comment, which worked in Buffy. Yeah. But everything's got to be a quip now. Completely destroys any jeopardy and tension and fear. And sorry to sound like I'm repeating myself, but her reacting to with genuine fear is what sold these costumes that weren't, you know, in retrospect, what, you know, some of them on their like bubble wrap. Let's be honest, some of them. But her reacting to it sold it. And whereas I think nowadays in modern television that any jeopardy is lost because of those silly quips and the need to be a bit of a smart ass.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I mean,
sorry if I digress.
No, it's fine. I think you're totally right, and absolutely. But again, from a young person's point of view, what Liz is doing, and certainly what Liz's performance is saying, you care about Sarah. You're actually there with her.
Yeah.
Paul was mentioning there how the Reign of Morbius was scary. It totally was. Everything was right in that story, wasn't it? Yeah. The effects, the set was right. The pitching of the lighting for once was absolutely fantastic. But more in case was, you know, Sarah was there. You were still with her. At this point, you were totally besotted with Sarah. I do have something that a quick quiz for you all.
On the Reign of Morbius. Justin, I had to mute myself there because we had barking dogs going on in the house there. But on the Reign of Morbius, the whole and Michael's absolutely right about the reaction on Elisabeth Sladen's face. But she plays blind so well. She doesn't.
Yeah.
She underplays it, and that one of the unsung cliffhangers in Doctor Who is that end of episode where Morbius is in the jar, screaming and shouting, and is paranoid about the sisterhood and about Solon and what's going on, and she's walking towards him blind, reaching out, trying to help, trying to do what Sarah does best, reaching out to help him, and he's having a paranoid attack, and she's just edging forward to this bubbling lump of brain in a jar. That very rarely is appreciated
as opposed to a tomato.
Fantastic cliffhangers in Doctor Who history.
It really is.
It
really is. And sorry, Paul, go ahead.
I guess the reason why the story is so scary is that all the actors play it real. And like Mike was saying with the jeopardy, it's done for real. It's believable, it's credible, and you're scared because you believe in what's happening to your favorite characters, and that's why it works.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely true. And Sarah again, and Liz especially playing it that way. Sarah is pivotal to this. You know, the first thing she sees when she gets her sight back is Chop Suey, and of course that was and she does it brilliantly. It's actually, when you look at it now, I quite like that now, that bit there where the sight's coming back. You know, I mean, God, waking up to that. I do have a quick quiz for you now, everybody, and who views as well. I'm going to read you something now.
Bear in mind it's 5 a.m. here.
Yep. Bear in mind. Yep. We've got this quote: "Sweaty gelignite is highly unstable. One good sneeze could set it off." Sorry.
Pyramids of Mars.
No sign of any detonators or fuses. No, nothing else. Maybe he sneezed. Again, it shows the humor between the two of them at this point, and the Doctor's reaction to, you know, it's brilliant. So yeah, we spoke about Pyramids of Mars very quickly. Now this is it. I mean, look at the two of them here. Look at this. They are enjoying every single moment of this incredibly dangerous situation they find themselves in. Michael?
Yeah, I was just marveling. It's been a while since I've seen some of these episodes, and I'm just looking at these shots, thinking I really need to go back. And I watched a few, obviously, in preparation for this, but just to watch her whole era in depth is something that I have to do. It really does. It really was a special time seeing those two like that.
Totally.
The scene I loved in Pyramid of Mars was the moment when poor Lawrence Scarman had been killed, and Tom Baker didn't allow much time for any sympathy. And I think he almost said, I've got it in the book here, he almost said, well, I warned him. And you know, and Sarah Jane goes, oh, hold on a minute. You know, sometimes I don't understand you, Doctor. Sometimes you don't seem, and he finishes a sentence.
Alien.
And then you have that moment when she's working out, she's still working with an alien, and emotion, which she carries all the way through. I mean, I know John talked about her arc with Pertwee and that, but as Sarah, she was consistent with this emotion for aliens, emotion for fellow human beings, And, let's not be too cold. And, she would call him out. And just like I said in Genesis of the Daleks, she pushed the Doctor to really think about the decision he was making about genocide of the Daleks. In this one, she was thinking, please don't be so kind of cold. Please don't be so mean. And of course, he had to put her in a place. And I have to say, the dialogue is really good, because after he says, listen, that's 5 or 6 people have died. I'm talking about a whole civilization. I'm talking about more. And when he does that, as we said, Sarah Jane's character goes, okay, then what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
She moves on.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. This Doctor, the third Doctor, wouldn't have handled that the same way, but the fourth, because he has that alien element that she knows. She stops herself when she says that, doesn't she? Sarah stops. Oh, sometimes you don't seem. Ooh, actually, there's a. You're not, are you? And that comes through beautifully. And I know that John wanted to talk about a particular element in this. Now, Sarah has taught a very big. Was it that?
Yeah, it was. Well, hold on, because it ties in with what we just said at the beginning of this about how they become best friends. But the thing about best friends is you never know all. There's always something held back. And at the beginning of this, of Pyramids of Mars, when they're returning to Earth, and the Doctor's a bit moody about the fact that he's not going to run around after the Brigadier anymore, and then he tells Sarah, "I'm a Time Lord. I walk in a tail." She says, "Oh, I know you are," and veil over her head, and treats it very jokingly. And then 2 short episodes later, he proves it to her.
Yes.
Laura Scarman's lying dead at her feet.
Yeah.
And she's saying, "Sometimes you don't see him," as Brendan, reading from the book, tells us, and he finishes the sentence, "human." So he proves to her that he has to keep an eye at all times on the bigger picture. And that while she is concerned about his lack of sympathy, empathy over the tragedy of the death of one brother at the hands of another, he's thinking at the deaths of thousands and thousands and millions of human beings on Earth and beyond if Sutex gets his way. So he's warned Sarah at the start of this, even as her best friend, and then she finds out. It's brilliant writing. So it just shows you, even amongst your best friends, you're always discovering.
I want to thank all the Who viewers for joining us tonight and putting in your comments. So please keep the comments coming. We do appreciate it. Absolutely spot on there, John, as well. But there is another lesson, a very important lesson that the Doctor teaches Sarah in Pyramids of Mars, and it's this one. It's the timelines can be altered. She, at this point, is absolutely convinced that because she states she's from 1980, she knows that Sutek didn't destroy Evan. She knows he didn't win. She knows that her future is safe. And the Doctor shocks not just Sarah, but I think the audience by reminding them that anything can happen in the past. We take this for granted today, but, watching this as a kid, through Sarah, you suddenly learn that nothing can be taken for granted. The Doctor is so solemn. He opens the door, she looks out, and she's horrified at one of the biggest clangers she's ever going to make. Actually, she does something very similar later on in Sarah Jane Adventures. She goes back to the 1950s and changes history, and she has to go back and stop it all again. I mean, what a headache. But she's aware that she's done it at that point because she's seen the alternative 1980. I mean, that is, again, a really powerful scene.
And you're quite right. I did sort of flag that up to you as something that I had remembered you right, GT, because, and Paul has used it in his tagline on his name there, because you've beautifully described the scene there. She's presented with what happens if they don't stay and get involved. And that's the first time Sarah has seen what would happen. She's never advocated running away before, but here we are. She says, well, look, we could just go. I know the world doesn't end, so off we go. Let's go. And the Doctor takes her and shows her the consequence of doing that. And she doesn't have to have hysterics. She doesn't have to have tearful renderings. She just says, but I'm from 1980. And that's
so sad.
One little 4 or 5 words tells you everything you need to know. My world is gone. That's how I have my future and the future of everybody in my hands. Unless I go back with this man and put this right, I think it's beautiful, and I think it's beautifully done. And it's, for it being so simple, makes it all the more dramatic.
Well, and can I just add to that before you say anything else? The compare and contrast of Fires of Pompeii, when Donna Noble has a similar moment about whether you can save the Pompeian people, and the Tenant Doctor shows you can't, fixed point in time. And of course, but that's much more emotionally wrought, isn't it? Remember, there's tears in the TARDIS and all the rest of it. Whereas, as you say, John, this is underplayed, it's well written, and as I've been saying all along now, the Sarah character is equal to the Doctor. She challenges him. She doesn't take everything he says as gospel. So in this case, she says, hold on a minute. How can this be true? I'm from 1980. And of course, he has to say, well, hold on a minute. It's a bit more complex than that. And so you get this element all the time that she keeps inquiring. She keeps pushing him. She keeps pushing, pushing harder. And of course, again, an iconic moment, emulated again later on, but done very emotionally charged.
This element in Pyramids of Mars is far superior, because you don't need emotion for this.
No.
You've just got a brilliant shock. I mean, that's all. Sarah is in shock at this point. She's from a time that has now been destroyed, and the Doctor has to explain to it, to answer TARDIS Spider's query here. So in Doctor Who, today can be yesterday, yes. But as the Doctor says to Sarah, it takes a being of limitless power, of Sutek's power, to absolutely destroy everything, which is what he's done. And please come back in a few weeks' time when we're going to talk more about this as we review Pyramids of Mars. Sudoku 24 is emotionally often more is less. Oh no, less is more. Absolutely. I mean, the way that this is done, there's no emotion in this apart from shock, and it works
genuinely unnerving.
It is. Remember, this is the first time Doctor Who as a program, I think, has really done this, because often, way back at the start, the Doctor just landed, sporadically and spontaneously, wherever he would land, probably lose connection with the TARDIS, and they were all desperate to get back and go and clear off. Then it became more sort of pointed, and the Doctor took on a role of planet saver or whatever. But this is the first time, really, where a companion turns to the Doctor, says, well, I know from my own experience, this doesn't happen. Let's go. And the program just very, very visibly demonstrates the importance of the Doctor's involvement and how everything is up for grabs in this series. But as you say, does it without hysterics, histrionics, and a full orchestra behind it.
And this is what I mean.
Absolutely.
We were still delivering a sci-fi here. So that scene was a very science fiction scene and well considered. And my comparison to Fires of Pompeii was it had already turned into a bit of soap opera by then.
Well, yeah, and that's something that original Doctor Who didn't do. We're going to move on now from Pyramids, because we are coming back to that in more depth in Who's Views Reviews in a few weeks' time. Please like, subscribe, and make sure you're with us for that one with all your comments. But I want to actually just put in, if I may, another story that scared the hell out of me. It's this one. And will any of you understand why?
Yeah.
Go on then.
Falling on the floor.
Yes, I understand why.
I was going to say she was off her face.
The face off.
It certainly was.
Off her face,
and it scared the hell out of me. What had they done to my beloved Sarah now? They turned her into a robot. I was absolutely distraught. What was going on? But that moment stayed with me. Yeah. And this is one of the things that Mary Whitehouse actually probably got right. It stayed with me all week. I was so worried about Sarah. How's that happened? What have they done to her? What's the Doctor going to do? Where have they put her? I mean, crikey. I mean, these guys really put a whole generation through the grinder, I tell you.
And it's although Android's Invasion is one of the weaker Hinchcliffe era stories, I was looking at the interview with Philip Hinchcliffe on one of the box sets, and he describes the whole ethos behind that story as building towards that cliffhanger. He wanted a story where Sarah's face would come off and expose the robot doings underneath. So that sort of whole story seems to have been constructed.
Well, Philip Hinchcliffe is evil, and he's very naughty.
He's a naughty boy.
for what
he's wonderful.
He's a naughty boy. I'll tell you something, because it was actually mentioned in the chat there a second ago. And again, thank you everybody for being in the chat. It was John. And John put this up. And I hope you're feeling better soon, John, and you'll be back on the show soon. We know that. What happened in Pyramids of Mars is the realization that the brig and everyone had gone in that scene. We have to talk about the Brigadier and Sarah's relationship with the Brigadier, because it was stunning. To the Brigadier, this was probably just another one in a long line of young ladies coming along. Do you know what I mean? Another one that the Doctor's got. Oh, isn't the Doctor very lucky? But here's Sarah Jane. But this is a relationship that stayed with them for years. I mean, Sarah and the Brig stay in touch. I mean, I love the fact that when she gets back to Earth, the Brig is there for her. And then they build this relationship and it stays with them for the rest of their days. I mean, how magical is this, guys?
Now you're getting me, JT. Now you're getting me.
Yeah.
It's
Those
just seeing.
Those two are there for a reason. My two faiths, always and forever. You know?
Let's just look at that again, because that is this picture, of course, which is absolutely stunning. I mean, look at them. I know that's Nick and Liz, but to me, it's forever the Brig and Sarah.
Yes.
Reunited in the Sarah Jane adventures. She goes to him for help when she needs help of big scale. When she needs to break into unit, there's only one man she can go to, and it's the Brig, and it just works absolutely beautifully. I mean, I was so touched when I saw that episode. I thought, hang on a minute, you know, they've got this right. I mean, it just makes sense. They've got all that history together. You know, and they even bumped into each other in the death zone, for crying out loud. You know, I mean, it's just absolutely stunning. I mean, do you guys feel the same way I do about that beautiful relationship?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love the way she early on, she, you know, the gentle ribbing of the Brigadier. You know, she would undercut him a bit sometimes, and I loved that.
One line that sticks in my mind. Of course not. You're a swinger, Brigadier. That's a fantastic.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
Yeah. And
she's good foil for him.
She loves the Brigadier when he wears his kilt and she has a good look at his nails.
Yeah.
What you were doing, the Doctor. Oh, how ridiculous, Smith, or whatever it is.
What's that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, but that again, it was Sarah's humor, wasn't it? It came through. She teased the Brigadier as well, but he responded to that. You know, he was. I mean, here's an offset picture as well. On-set picture. I mean, look,
I've never seen that. I've never seen that.
It warms your heart. It does.
Lovely.
It really does, and that's from Sarah Jane Adventures when they're doing this. I mean, we never got Nick into Doctor Who again, which I'm robbing. But to see him with Sarah was actually, it made sense.
I was just going to say, JT, I'm kind of glad we got him. If it was a choice, I think I'd rather see him in that series, because I suspect he may have been treated the character may have been treated a little better in Sarah Jane than the main show. Oh,
total respect. Absolute respect. When you watch that scene, I mean, he's there for her every step of the way. And of course, Nick is struggling at this point in his life. He can't walk properly. He's obviously a little bit in pain, but he's there. And he's not just there as the Brig. He's there as Nick for Liz. And that's beautiful. And the fondness that's between these two, I mean, it just makes the entire episode. And when they come face to face with Sontaran, the Brig's still the Brig. He's not having any other nonsense here. It's just absolutely fantastic. We're going to travel very quickly now to this, because, of course, after Sarah left the Doctor, she thought that was it. And it wasn't really. And this was the first of many returns, because by this point, you know, Sarah has moved on. She's taken receipt, if you like, of K9. So we got K9 and Company, the first ever Doctor Who spin-off. Everybody seems to forget. Liz Sladen, Sarah Jane Smith, first Doctor Who spin-off. Huge success. And this all worked again, didn't it? I mean, this was just, I mean, this made this time for me in 1983. Sarah Jane was back. Yay! Do you guys remember this as well?
Absolutely. Yep, I remember watching it as it went out here in Australia, and just being so excited to see, because again, the repeats, we were all over the place. I think Robots of Death was on earlier in the evening, and then the Five Doctors was on later in the evening. We
hadn't seen Robots of Death at that point for it'd been 6 years since any of us had seen it, so we were all champing at that.
I know. It was just so strange in Australia. It really was. But then we got when we saw the Five Doctors, just to see her back was fantastic, and I think I'd seen K9 and Company, you know, was broadcast here around the same time that you guys got it. So so it was great to see a continuation of K9 and Company, sort of.
There's not a lot of love for K9 and Company in certain quarters, but it's part of my Christmas tradition.
I love it. I think it's great.
Me too. every
I love it too,
Christmas. You know,
I love it.
It's usually post Christmas, usually about either Christmas Eve, sometimes, but mostly Boxing Day or beyond. It just seems to suit that post.
It's a beautiful. I love it as a kid.
I can't imagine Christmas without K9 and Company.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, watching it as a kid, and when K9 comes out, and then knowing full well that she'd never worked with K9, and when he mentions the doctor again, I'm repeating myself, but her reaction to K9 mentioning that doctor, and it gets you more than any other.
Didn't forget Doctor,
Yeah, which harkens back to that
yeah.
original line. Don't forget me, doesn't it? When she departs.
Yeah,
we're not going to really talk about when Sarah leaves the TARDIS because I still can't do it.
I did wonder why you'd skipped over. You know, JT, you missed a crucial moment there.
Heartbreaking to this very day for the simple reason she left. And it's also quite I said this I'm going to name drop now, and you know I'm famous for it, so do forgive me, but when I bumped into Terence Dix years later at a Doctor Who convention, I told him off in a sense very nicely, because in his novelization of The Face of Evil he suggests the Doctor's trying to get back to her. Now, I thought that was happening in the TV series as well, and it didn't. It never did. So the moment when she, I mean, I was heartbroken. I was absolutely heartbroken, and I think a generation were. And I do struggle with it to this day. I mean, she left. She went away, and we had to wait for 1981 to see her back with K9, which is an absolute joy. And then we got her back, of course, for the 5 Doctors, which was also an absolute joy. One of several returning companions, of course, in the big 20th anniversary special, which is still to be beaten, he says, editorial comment. And she's reunited with the 3rd Doctor, and Sarah just picks up where they left off. You became all
Keith and Curl.
Yes.
And
well, maybe I did, but I haven't yet.
And then the beautiful little line coming back, of course, to viewers is, "Oh, I see." Well, no, and it's just beautifully played.
No, I don't. Never mind.
The great story that Liz Sladen tells about that is that the Teeth and Curls line was actually hers. And
was it?
John Pertwee sort of appropriated it. She didn't mind. That was the way they worked together. And he thought, would it be better if I said this and you react to it, talk about Liz's reaction skills. So he got the line, she got the reaction, and I think it was probably better for it.
Absolutely. Timescales here says he had to order a PAL VHS from the UK to be able to see K9 and Company. It was very expensive, but worth it. It is, and it's now historically so important in the whole thing because K9 and Company sets up Sarah's story for the rest of Sarah's days, or sadly for Liz's days, because of course it continues, as we're talking about, into the 5 Doctors, and then it continues into the Sarah Jane adventure. She's School Reunion comes before that as well, and then we've got that, but K9 is still with her, and Gary is saying what most of us are saying, K9 and a glass of mulled wine, that's Christmas Eve tradition for me. It absolutely is. If you don't watch K9 and Company at Christmas time, you're breaking the law, or the JT law anyway.
There's your Christmas special, JT.
Well, we've got several things planned. You never know what could be coming up with K9 and Company in December. Please like and subscribe and ring that bell so you get notifications of what we're doing. It's all going to be there. One thing, of course, that we were missing, and we won't gloss about because we've talked about this in the 5 Doctors review as well, but one thing we do miss is Sarah's reunion with a certain person. So let's just for a second, Who viewers and Whotastic panel, let's just for a second imagine.
Oh, my goodness. You know, that's probably my biggest what if in Doctor Who. If Tom Baker and John Pertwee had shared a scene together, I mean, wouldn't it have been just with Liz? I mean, it just would have been extraordinary.
Poor Liz would have been absolutely fraught, I'm sure.
It would have been so strange.
It would have been, but the original plan, of course, was to have Sarah with the 4th Doctor, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, again, we're talking alternatives now, guys. I mean, I wish we had.
The BBC could have afforded the paycheck for Elisabeth Sladen to have been there in between Tom and John. That's probably that's too far.
I know.
And she would get every cent.
I'm just wondering, JT, did was that included in the pitch to Tom from JNT that he would be working with Liz?
Yes.
It was.
Yes, and it almost did swing Tom apparently one, because of course we know that Tom did originally say yes and then slept on it, and we all understand his reason, we respect it.
Yeah.
The big draw for Tom was, with Liz. Yes, that was in there as well. And Sudoku. Oh, I've just lost him. Sudoku, the first multi-doctor punch-up. Yeah, Sudoku was saying here in that case. Then the third would probably have been with the Brigadier. Yes,
I think Katie Manning was going to be.
She couldn't make it over from your neck of the woods, though.
She was approached.
I like this from Jack, who's now breaking my heart again. Stop it, Jack. This is it. I'm going to pack my goodies and go home.
I said I'm going to pack my goodies and I'm going home.
No, exactly. And at that point, I remember being a little boy just thinking,
and of course,
my heart was breaking. My little heart was breaking.
And of course, Liz,
thank you, Tardy Spider. Appreciate it.
Liz, Sarah Jane predicted fan reaction in the modern series when she had that wonderful line, "Boy, am I sick of that sonic screwdriver." Because I think we all are at this point.
Yeah, she predicted it by decades, didn't she? She really did. Well, we're up to now the fact that 1983, off she toddles again, and we don't see her again. Life goes on. The Doctor goes on. We all grow up. We get new jumpers. We get haircuts. We move house. We get jobs. And we don't see Sarah again. The series comes off air, and what happens in series 2? The big news, which shook many of us to our very foundations. The legend was back because Sarah, of course, reappeared. My goodness, I can't believe this. To this day, I still get goosebumps thinking about this. Here she was. I mean, this was such a clever move for the second series of the rebooted Who by the production team. And we all know the story now that Liz was a bit sort of, oh my God, would Sarah work again now? It's a different show. But she did it, and she did it brilliantly. And Sarah was back, and she was a huge hit, especially with the new leading man, who you just tell that Tennant was absolutely, he was there, wasn't he? He was fanboy all the way through this episode.
Yeah.
He really was. And I can tell you something from my point of view, guys. School Reunion would not have worked with Eccleston. It only works because Tennant knows who Sarah is. Or at this point now, we're getting to call her Sarah Jane by this point. Have you noticed the difference between the sets of fans here? Yeah. We know her as Sarah. The new ones know her as Sarah Jane. And I think that's actually addressed in one of the Sarah Jane adventures where Rani says, the Doctor says, where's Sarah, or something like this. And Rani says it's Sarah Jane. She doesn't like being called Sarah. And the Doctor goes, she does with me. And so speaks an entire generation of fandom in that second. It's brilliant. Yes, Paul.
The moment in School Reunion where Anthony Head introduces Sarah Jane to the Doctor in the staff room is brilliant, and Anthony Head's performance in that episode is also superb. But that moment when the Doctor sees her in the staff room, it doesn't let on who he is really. They're kind of like hinting a little bit. I knew a Smith, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff, and then it's not until we see each other by the TARDIS in the school corridor when she sees him properly for the first time who he is. It's a great moment, and it's one of the saddest moments in New Who. It worked really well for me, and I'm sure hundreds and thousands of other fans were crying at that episode. Yeah. It was such a great episode.
I found this is when Doctor Who really understands itself. A shout out to Toby who wrote that episode. Honestly, I mean, to get Sarah back and Liz Sladen back, because I think we have to talk about the two parts here. You wanted Liz Sladen back now the series was running. They said it was like unfinished business. So it was unfinished business for Liz, and it was unfinished business, obviously, for Sarah in how it had concluded in Hand of Fear. And I just thought that the symbiosis of those two areas was unbelievable. It was too much. I think there were some clever touches of dialogue. I mean, I agree with Paul when they first meet, but that cafeteria scene when they're sat and she is allowed to say what she wanted to say about the previous years. And I think to be a fan of a science fiction series, because it can only be in a science fiction series, really, to get somebody who hasn't been in the series for so long, and he's got older, but he's got younger in physique. She's got older, and to have that whole idea of, oh, you move on, you carry on, you get somebody else, you just drop people. Did you really think of me? Because obviously that Rose added that. That was so clever, so perceptive. Yeah. so emotionally astute to write, and she delivered it. And like Paul said, I found it a very difficult but beautiful story to watch.
And Phil Collinson and Russell Davies have spoken about the whole idea, the whole notion behind doing this episode was to reflect that not only to get this sort of buzz about a current companion, seeing that there was somebody before her who's been left behind and moved on, but also, and I think this is the bigger point about this, that the Doctor doesn't age in the same way that humans do, or at the same pace and time, though he doesn't want to see these people who are his friends age and die. He wants to remember them and the good times, and he has to move on. And I think Sarah gets that. She absolutely gets that in this story. That's why the Doctor has, although there was an abrupt ending to their initial relationship, but the whole relationship with the Doctor has to end because he goes on.
Yeah,
they won't. And I think that's beautifully handled. Because I'll tell you why. Because it's not mawkish. It's done in a very, very soap way, dramatic way.
Before I forget, because there's one thing I said earlier about how, we all bonded with her as a companion. Now, we've all got to a point in our lives, we're all older as fans. And this is when I thought School Reunion and her performance and the message that was coming across was even more powerful, which is we all know now we're mortal. And we all know that we actually may not see the last stories of Doctor Who as broadcast. You never know. And you get to see as a fan, just like Sarah Jane, that we all have a time frame. And maybe this series doesn't, as in the Doctor doesn't. And I have to say, the mortality element that was played in School Reunion, I found difficult on every level. The Liz Sladen element, the Sarah Jane element, and me. Because it played to all those levels. As a fan, I'm following her. We've all got a limit, and I found that so powerful.
What Sudoku 20, I want to just move into that in a second, but Sudoku 24 is saying, I feel like the Sarah of the old series would have got on with her life. Some regrets, but not consumed with them. And I think in this episode, she's there, isn't she? She's got back from Earth. A few years later, she gets K9. She's gotten back in touch with Harry. She's got back in touch with the brig. She has moved on. She, as I said at the top of the show, by this point in School Reunion, she is one of the top 3 journalists in the UK, Sarah. She's made it. She's big news. She's famous. She can get in anywhere, basically, even though she does like to break into schools in a lovely leather jacket in the middle of the night through a window. But John's also saying that one of his scenes... yeah.
I used to do that as a kid.
One of his scenes, at the scene where she tells the Doctor, you have to move forward, you can't go back, which shakes sense into him, shows how important Sarah is. Only she could make him listen. And that ties in with the point I was saying earlier on, doesn't it, John, about the fact it doesn't matter what face the Doctor is wearing. It's still the Doctor. She understands him. And at this point, of course, she's adapting. My only one niggle, and there's always a niggle with me, the only one niggle I've got about the return of Sarah into Doctor Who was this utter, I don't get this. I think this was purely because of the new audience. But this whole thing about the relationship between her and Rose, what did Mickey call it? The other woman or something like that? The
girlfriend of the ex.
Right, okay. Now, I don't understand this at all from Sarah, because by this point, Sarah has met several of the Doctor's various companions. She knows all about them. She gets on with it. She knows the brig and everything like that. So I think that element there just didn't ever get me. I mean, here's this new one, as a companion who has met all these other people by now. I don't know. It just doesn't sit with me at that time. But that doesn't take away from an absolutely fantastic story. And yet again, they got us. A whole generation, yet again, they get us, because what happens is she leaves again. And we are all there at this particular point. Our hearts are breaking for the second time with Sarah, the second time, because she's left. He leaves her again. And this time she's had her chance to say, right, goodbye. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Yes, he leaves her with K9 Mark IV. Yes, there's a tantalizing, there could be a series, but at that point, I think an entire generation was in bits. And it was one of those few Doctor Who episodes of the modern era where I actually even got there. I was like, oh
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
not again! I can't cope with this again.
Yeah.
You know?
It's not just a single tear. I blub. I
Yes.
absolutely
Yeah.
blub.
Oh, yeah.
But Brendan put this quite well. You know, you are reminded of your own mortality, that this is someone
Yeah.
from my childhood. And here I am at whatever age I was then. I'm watching it again now, at whatever age I am now. It's multi-layered, and it's hitting all those notes in your psyche. And that's why we cry, because we're crying for our youth. Our youth is gone, you know, and even now thinking about it, I can feel myself. I'll go.
If you've just
Well,
joined
when-
us, we're having a wonderful time here. Very cheery.
Yeah, very cheery, yeah.
Yeah, it's the power and oh, go on, Paul. Go on, Paul.
Well, I'm filling up.
I know you.
I was going to say
I'm-
just to add to the blubbing and lose viewers because we're getting really maudlin. But I'm thinking about the setting up the emotion of the story. When we thought they'd killed off K9, that was it. That started it, and then she was leaving him again. It was a snot fest, wasn't it, John?
For the whole nation, I think. At that point.
John's in bits at the moment. Bless him.
John's absolutely
I'm with
right.
you, John. I'm with you, John.
Sarah does leave him again, but she does so on her terms. Yes, again, it shows where Sarah is at this point in her life. She is older. She's been, messing around since the Five Doctors, thinking, will he be around? But yes, it is on her terms. And of course, then she gets to see him again because she suddenly becomes part of the narrative. Only Sarah could fit in with this weird lot that the Doctor suddenly gets involved in. But Sarah fits in beautifully here. She knows exactly what she's got to do. She understands exactly the threat. We mentioned it earlier as well. When she hears the Dalek voice come over on the radio wave, she is terrified. This is Sarah understanding that she's met the Daleks before on several occasions. They are ruthless, and the Earth is lost. And there's only one man that can save them, and she doesn't know where he is. And then when he turns up, the relief on her face when she sees him. I mean, that whole thing, Sarah fitted in perfectly there, didn't she, guys? She was just right.
And also with Davros later on, Davros recognises her voice as she does his, and that, for those of us of a certain vintage, and even those of us who watched it subsequently, because it's been the most repeated Doctor Who story up to that point anyway, that hits again all those notes because Davros recognises Sarah's voice.
Yeah.
So Sarah recognizing
magic.
It is. That's the word. It's magic.
Yeah, and it brings the whole thing around, doesn't it? Really, because yes, it's one of those sort of member berries, but it's actually integral to the story. Because to omit that, the rematch between Sarah and Davros would have been careless. You have to have that little bit in there. I mean, here's Davros absolutely stunned because it's millennia. It's millennia after that. This human being has been around for millennia. You can't be alive. It's beautiful, that bit there. And it's integral. And of course, what that does at this point, we're into the land of the Sarah Jane adventures now, aren't we, Who viewers? And I mean, what a series that was. Please give us your memories of this as well, because
I was actually lucky enough to be living in the UK when this premiered, so I got to see it with you guys. Yeah, I was so excited. Here I was living in the UK, and I'm watching new.
Do you remember, Michael? That was New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say School Reunion.
Yeah.
School Reunion was originally broadcast on BBC One on the 29th of April 2006, and a quick turnaround later on, Sarah Jane Adventures, the 1st of January 2007, and it was the first of 53 episodes that Sarah Jane starred in, Elisabeth Sladen starred in. It ran, of course, until 2011. John is saying here, it shows just how talented Liz was, not to be only classed as the golden era of the main show, but also has 2 successful spin-offs. Not many actors can manage that. And that is actually in 2011, that is acknowledged by the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, who said there is no other actors, there are not many actors who get to be loved by several generations over. I mean, he nailed this with her. So, of course, here's another Doctor for her. She has, she has met the 10th Doctor by this point. She actually gets to like the 10th Doctor. She really does. When he goes to say goodbye to her, all it is a look and a wave. And she gets it. She knows he's dying. She knows this one's going. But then this one crops up. And not only that, she gets to meet Joe Grant. And
that was particularly exciting.
Wasn't it just? It really was, because it works. You know, the dynamic between these three. I mean, at first you've got Liz, you've got Sarah and Joe meeting and coming together. Sarah recognizes in Joe a kindred spirit, because at this point, of course, in the story, The Death of the Doctor in Sarah Jane Adventures, Sarah's convinced there's no way the Doctor can die because I'd know. And then Joe comes along in her lovely mishap way. And basically what's gone on there then is she says the same thing. Bang! They're there. So when the Doctor turns up again, they have every right to be pleased with themselves, don't they, guys? You know, they are really pleased with themselves at this point. We got it right. We will know if anything ever happens to you.
For me growing up, I mean, Joe and Sarah were my favorite companions, and to see them both together was just such a treat. And I just
can't believe it took so long. Can you?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I'm just thinking, I think, to be honest, I think I enjoy Sarah Jane Adventures more than the main show of the new series. I mean,
I think a lot of with you there, Michael.
Sarah Jane Adventures is more like traditional Who, the 25-minute formats. It is more traditional like that, and they pitch it that way. So, I think we can understand the reason why we might appreciate it that more. There's a bit more pressure on the main show now to conform to perhaps more modern dramatic tropes and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I think we love it so much. I loved the dynamic with Sarah and every Doctor. Liz just can go with any Doctor she wants.
Yes.
She's superb. But the dynamic with her and Joe, Katie Manning, is fantastic. And I'm sure Katie may well have become a recurring character had Sarah Jane Adventures continued, because I think that was a great relationship the two of them had together too. And that was, again, something we've been deprived of.
Yeah.
The moment in that episode when they try to drain the memories to make the new TARDIS key so they could get into the TARDIS is amazing. Just all the flashbacks of memories of Peladon and Exelon and the Master, all that kind of amazing stuff. The three Doctors all came together, and it was a great nostalgia fest for us fans, and I loved it. And I agree, the relationship between Katie and Liz is superb, and they work so well with Matt Smith. And Matt Smith's got a great line, I think he says to Katie, he says, have you been baked? I think he says.
I didn't like that line. I did not like that line. No.
Well, I think in context it was fine, because Joe, of course, she's aware the Doctor can regenerate, as we now call it, because she was in the Three Doctors, of course. She's aware of it, but she never actually witnessed it. Sarah was there when 3 turned into 4, so she's never actually witnessed that. So this must be a culture shock when this young man suddenly appears. But I mean, it is fabulous, isn't it? From that, I sort of get that line. But you're right. The chemistry that, Sarah and Joe has, superb. They are best friends from that moment on, as I imagine a lot of the Doctor's companions would be if they ever met, because who else can share what they've got, the dangers, the harrows, what they've been through? Anybody else would lock them up in a padded cell, but no, they're there. They understand it.
Could have a lovely a spin-off called The Golden Girls of Doctor Who. You really could have them all.
I wish we could, but unfortunately now, of course, we really can't. We really can't. But there's a particular moment that I love. Matt, of course, nails it. He knows his Doctor. I love the way that the Matt plays the Doctor, so he recognizes the importance of not just Sarah, who he's seen recently as the Doctor and his 10th incarnation, if you know what I'm saying, but also the importance of Joe. Matt nails this. He understands the history, not like certain others, but there's a history here, and he gets it and he plays it. And his joy in this scene, where for the first time in decades, Sarah and Joe find themselves on an actual alien planet, and just like, oh my God, it's still around. We're still doing it. We're back in the swing. Matt plays this. The reaction to these two, magical. It's absolutely pure Doctor Who. I love it.
It is.
This episode's written by Russell, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
He writes Matt's Doctor so well. And you're right. The beautiful thing here is that Joe gets to hear what Sarah knows, that the Doctor checks in on them, that he didn't just abandon them. He knows what they've been up to. She's been in the Amazon, all her adventures. He's well aware of that. And so therefore Joe can leave the Doctor now knowing that he's still been very much part of her life, checking in. I think that's lovely.
Sadoko's saying that the maddest part of this is Carful gets referenced. Isn't that brilliant? It's just that little moment where all of us go, the Time Lash episode. It's just fantastic. I loved that bit as well. I just thought, yes, that works. Thank you for that one, Mr. T. Davis. I loved that bit as well. John's also saying here as well that it's a beautiful moment, and that comment about going back to check on them. Well, he did when he was dying, and I've always said that the regenerations in modern Doctor Who seem to take months, but it certainly did for the 10th Doctor, because he went and checked on all his previous companions to make sure they were all okay. How long did he keep that radiation in him? He must have been really desperate at some. No wonder it was all over the shop. Gary Bryant here is saying Doctor Who Golden Girls with Fraser dating them all. We'll move on. Naughty Gary, naughty. I'm sure it's been tried in real life. Oh, sorry, I don't mean that, Fraser. I love you. Did I put this on for Gary as well? Sarah and Joe Grant was lovely and perfectly pitched. There's nothing. Yeah, I mean, it just works. And the brilliant thing about the Sarah Jane Adventures for Sarah Jane is it was a massive hit. It brought Sarah back. It brought her back to us with a series of adventures, which, yes, they are more in tune with our Doctor Who, and they're exciting for that. And, but it brought her to an entirely new generation who fell in love with Sarah Jane, and also Liz Sladen. And what more can you say without getting really, really sad about that? What a legacy. And what a way to go out of. But for me, I have to say, she's still out there, and she's still with K9.
Of course she is.
And she's still having adventures. I don't care what anybody else says, because Sarah will live on forever, as far as I'm concerned. And that's the only thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have to be thankful that the program, whatever we think of it, came back and gave a great actress a well-deserved second chance to go for career. Because let's face it, female actresses, if they want to have a family and all the rest of it, and there's judgments about looks and all this nonsense. Although I have to say, Liz Sladen was glamour, and she was so good-looking and beautiful, but she was also very loyal to the show, and I have to say, I'm so glad that the show became loyal to her and give her a second go.
Oh man, look at that show!
And it's important. I just think in the end, it's important. Liz Sladen got another go at this and got a go at being the lead. I mean, there were moments in Doctor Who when she felt like the lead. There was the moment in Genesis, she had the full other adventure. In Robot, she seemed to lead for a while he was still kind of working himself out. But she got a go here. And I know we're talking about the character, but can I just say for a second, I just feel really good that Liz Sladen got those years. I really am glad.
Yeah. I think we all are here. And, for us as well, she's always going to be there. I do want to show these as well, which I think a lot of people would have seen now because they were printed. These were taken by James Clever. They were printed in Doctor Who magazine ages and ages ago now. For me, this captures the relationship between Tom and Liz beautifully. Here they are messing around, pretending they're making a movie. Look at them. I mean, that you can see the joy of filming and working together in these shots. It's just beautiful. And oh man, it must have been a joy to be with them and to be working on the show back then. They are, aren't they? I mean, they're just wonderful.
The great picture, GT. They really show the relationship between Tom and Liz, the rapport, the friendship. They are best friends, and it's a bit like that moment in Seeds of Doom, the very last shot when they arrive in Antarctica in the TARDIS, and they wonder why they've ended up there again, and they do that wonderful gag about time travel at the end, and then they just laugh hysterically, and then the titles kick in, and that really shows their relationship, how close they were, how friendly they were, how much of a rapport they had and a chemistry. It's superb.
It really does.
I was going to say, often fans of a certain ilk are guilty of saying the new show doesn't do this, the new show doesn't do that, of which I am guilty. But I said it earlier about the sonic screwdriver. But in all seriousness, I think we owe Russell T Davies a debt of gratitude for bringing Sarah back.
It showed his love as well, Michael, didn't it?
Yeah. So
it showed his love from Sarah. You're absolutely right. It showed his love from Sarah as well. Yeah, and it worked.
Just the last word for me then, just to say, everything that you repeat everything you said there is spot on. We started this talking about how lucky we were to have Sarah. Little did we know in the Time Warrior the impact this character, this actress, would have on Doctor Who and its legacy throughout. Tom Baker, I think, summed it up beautifully in the tribute documentary to Sarah on the DVD box set. When she passed too early, he said, "Poor Liz," and then he said, "Poor us."
Yeah, I don't want to get too morose on that, but I'm glad you mentioned that.
So I'm just leave that bit and then come back and say, but great for us, because the legacy we've been left with by this actress, her generation, the generation after that, the generation after that, and ad infinitum. Like Doctor Who, Sarah Jane Smith will live forever.
Yeah. And I just want to go back to that point as well very quickly, because that is one of the few times we actually see Tom Baker and his heart's broken. I think it's beautiful because Tom is the consummate performer, as we know. He's always performing for us as fans. But for that brief few seconds, that's where we get to see, for the first time possibly, the real Tom Baker. And it's so moving. I can't watch it again.
No,
because
it's hard to watch.
It really is hard to watch.
Can I, JT, can I just address a question in the chat from Jack Thursby? Did anyone here meet Liz? I didn't, regrettably. Did any of you, or am I jumping the gun, JT?
No, that's fine, because we're going to be, we are coming to the end of this lovely companion piece now. So, yeah, did anyone meet Liz?
Unfortunately, I didn't.
No, I was only in the same party at Longleat. She was that far away from me, and she whooped when she heard Warriors of the Deep was the first title, because JNT announced it, and I got to see her just whooping for joy that the Sea Devils were back and all that lot. But yeah, I was.
The Sea Devils. What was that for?
Sorry,
what was that for?
That was at Longleat when they wanted a tidbit for the new series, and JNT quickly grabbed the microphone and said, "I'll tell you the title of the first story."
Oh, I see.
And Elisabeth Sladen was right next to him, and she whooped and said, "Oh, that sounds exciting." I was telling the show, but she was just that far away.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say I was very lucky, because I did meet Liz, and I met Liz on a couple of occasions, and I even interviewed her on stage at a convention, and I treasure the memories to this day and always will, because she was a joy. I was a little bit worried because Liz was. She knew what she liked and she knew what she didn't like. And by this point, I actually interviewed her for school reunion, a convention after school reunion broadcast. And we all ended up watching the Satan Pit, I think it was, together on the Saturday night on this big screen of this convention, which happened to be in Blackpool. And I was doing the interviews on the panels of the school reunion cast. And I got to meet Liz, and I walked into the green room, and Liz was there, and she was basically saying, "I want this, I want this, I want this." And I thought, oh no, this is going to be one of those cases where you should never meet your heroes. And then I'm introduced. No, we got on like a house on fire. When she realized I had Liverpool connections and we had a similar sense of humor, that was it. It was done. And she was a joy to interview. And we had a lovely laugh. And I'll tell you a secret as well. We were all at the dinner, and we're there, and we're talking. And I said, "So what? Go on. You're getting your own series then? You're getting your own." She said, "I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you anything." She knew she was, but she wasn't allowed to say anything. And it was just, oh man, it was just a joy to actually be able to have that memory with her. And yeah, it was just superb. Another quiz for you here, everybody, before we finish up. Another bit of humor here. Fourth Doctor. I feel disorientated. Sarah Jane. This is the disorientation center. That makes sense. Go on.
Android invasion.
Correct. The Android invasion.
Yay.
It just shows how they work. Absolutely how they work. It's just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Well, listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for Companion Piece. Sarah Jane Smith, Elisabeth Sladen. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please let us know, because if you have enjoyed this, there's plenty more companions for us to have a look at and to have a discussion about. So please let us know if you have. Yeah, what can I say? Thank you to the WHOTASTIC panel for coming back to what I think has been a really good show. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you guys have as well. Please do like the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you know exactly when we're going live and when there's some recorded footage for us. And also, please do share, because that would be brilliant. If you can do all that sort of stuff, you can share the videos for us. That's wonderful. We're going to be back this very week with this. That's right. The result of our viewers' choice was the Unquiet Dead. So we will be back on Thursday live at 7 o'clock. You are very welcome, because it's not just our views, it's your views. This is Whose Views. To the WHOTASTIC panel, thank you very much for joining us. We will see you again next time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.